Hey everyone, in this video I will show you how you can create a signature alarm sound that sounds like this. For this I will only use the free synth Vital, so you can download that from the developer's homepage and follow along in the process. Alright, let's start with taking a look at the different steps that we will follow to create this sound. This sound will be created in 4 steps within Vital. I will start at the voice page and set up the oscillators, shape the envelope and route it into a filter. The second step is to add the pitch modulation this sound is relying on. In step 3 we add the character and the sonic texture of the sound, and we will do that with some internal effects in Vital. We will almost try to break this sound in order to get that alarm feeling that we're after. And in step 4 we add in some life into the sound with modulating certain parameters of those effects that we added in step 3. So let's dive into it and start with step 1. Alright, so here we are in Vital's voice page, and we will only use 2 oscillators for this sound, and I will have one of them as my fundamental oscillator and then the other one to bring some more frequency depth and more richness to the sound and some width to the sound. I usually do it the opposite, that I have the fundamental oscillator furthest down, but for some reason in this case I started from the top. So oscillator 1 is our fundamental, and this is just a sine wave 1 octave down, nothing else. And the envelope here is just a little bit of hold and a little bit of decay, so nothing crazy there either. So at this stage it sounds like this. So it's just a bass sine wave, more or less. And then I add oscillator 2, and this is a saw wave. 8 voices, so it just creates a richer sound, more width to the sound, a little bit of detuning, but not much. So now it sounds like this. So still not an alarm, but a much fuller sound, of course. And then I route them into filter 1 just to be able to control the high end of the sound. A little bit of resonance, but nothing crazy. Now it's time to proceed with step 2, the pitch modulation. And this is the most important part of a sound like this. An alarm sound always has some kind of pitch shift in some way. It can be wow, wow, or it can be wow, wow, or whatever. I mean, I'm not the best alarm singer in the world, but you get the idea. So this is like what creates that alarm feeling, and you can do this in many different ways. In this case I used LFO1, and I used it for a couple of different other things also, but I used it for modulating the transpose of oscillator 1 and oscillator 2. So with this engaged it sounds like this. So as you hear, kind of a drastic difference, and this is much more like that alarm sound that we're after. So we're actually modulating 48 semitones on both of these, but this is just slightly less. And this is something that you will notice now, that I'm trying to like have as much detuning and offsets from different stuff as I can. And that's like because I want this to be like the broken alarm sound that's really like nerving and really like engaging. We need to do this now. We need to like go out and fight, or they are here, or whatever. It's something that just screams emergency. So it's almost, as I said in the intro, like we try to break it a little bit. So a really drastic modulation on the transpose or the pitch of the oscillators is one way of creating that emergency feeling. But I want to have it like even more unstable. So I used LFO2 with a different setting, so it just ramps up and ramps down. And then I use this also for a couple of different things, but I also use this for the tuning. So this is just slightly detuning on the oscillators, both on oscillator 1 and oscillator 2, and once again different amounts of the modulation. But this will create even more like instability to the sound, because it will just wobble because this LFO moves really, really fast. So now it sounds like this. And without those. So it just adds that character on top, like it's almost like it's trying to sprint or something. It's just even more like nerving to me. And now we actually have the fundamental building blocks of a signature alarm sound. We have the envelope and we have the oscillators that just creates the main sound, and then we have the pitch modulation. Now it's time to give it that extra girth, enhance that sonic texture of the sound, and we will do that with some internal effects in Vital. So let's flip over to the effect side of it. And the first thing I want to do is create even more like a bit of width to it and a little bit of detuning into it. And a chorus is a really great way of doing this. So let's engage that and listen to it now. And without. So it creates that slightly detuning to it and a little bit of width to it that works really well for this sound. More and more detuning will just make it sound even more broken. After that, speaking of breaking stuff, let's add distortion to this. And if we're talking about pitch modulation to be like the fundamental part of the sound overall, the distortion is the fundamental part of the effects to a sound like this. This will add that energy to the sound, but it will more importantly add that broken character to it if you really push it really hard. And that's what we want to do in this case. So I still use soft clip. I like how this sounds on the sound, but I drive it really hard. So now we get that even more feeling of emergency in the sound. After that, I just want to give it a little bit of distance to the sound. An alarm sound is rarely up close to you. It's often something that you hear in the corridor or on the open field or something. It's usually not something that you have so close to you. So a bit of reverb is often good to have on these sounds. So it's nothing super crazy, a little bit of decay and a little bit of mix, but it's just to add that space to it. And now we can hear that low, distorted low end in the sound that doesn't really sound natural. So after this, I just engage an EQ and just low cut it. Nothing crazy, just to remove that low rumble there. And last in the chain, there's a filter. And this is just to control the high end over time. And I have applied this cutoff together with the cutoff of the first one to this macro here. So I can control that over time if I want to. And now it sounds like this. And if we bring up the filters a bit, we get a really cool, distorted alarm sound. But it feels a little bit static and not that natural, and not that I think we can give even more like emergency and alarm feeling out of it. And we will do that with modulating some of the effects that we just added in. And let's do that in step 4. So what we're aiming for in the 4th step of creating this signature alarm sound is adding that movement and character and like feeling of organicness, if that's a word. But you get what I mean. And that's actually something that I'm almost always striving for when I'm doing sound design. I want the listener to just accept the sound as a part of the overall feeling. I just want them to accept this sound as a broken alarm sound. I don't want them to hear like, oh, that's a Vital synth with some distortion and some modulation on this and that and a bit of reverb. I don't want them to do that. I just want them to have the feeling, and that's the most important part. And to convey a feeling with software synthesizers, you often need to do some modulation because that's where the life comes from, in my opinion. Because it's not static anymore, it has some movement in it. It brings life and air into a sound. So that's what we're aiming for in this step. So earlier I said that I used LFO1 and LFO2 for a couple of different things than just the pitch modulation. And this is what I did. So I used LFO2, the really, really fast LFO, to modulate the phase of both oscillators. So we have them here. So now it sounds like this. And if we unbypass these modulators, it sounds like this. So it's not a drastic difference. But it removes a bit of the tonality from the original sound and just blurs it a little bit, and that brings a bit more of that organicness that I'm striving for. And then I used LFO1, the slower one with just the envelope setting that I used to modulate the transpose of oscillator 1 and oscillator 2. I used this to modulate the feedback of the chorus here and the filter cutoff down here and the distortion drive. So with all those modulators unbypassed, it sounds like this. And now we can start play with that filter a bit. And that's actually our final sound. Now we have that life to the sound. It moves over time and it has that distorted character that will cut through. It has a bit of depth, a bit of detuning to it. And it just ticks all boxes for me as a signature alarm sound. Alright, that's it for this video. Thanks for watching and I see you in the next one.